Wouldn't you love to have an influencer rave about your products or services all day? Well, who wouldn't? The thing is, you've got to be careful. Like, how does that influencer marketing strategy fit into your overall strategy, right? Let's listen to Oliver as he explains a couple of points that you should keep in mind when you are starting to work with influencers. Specifically, the difference between having a fan base and just an audience, or how your brand is positioned and how that fits with the influencer that you're gonna use. Those and several other points are gonna be part of his speech. I'm very much looking forward to have you on our AdWorld stage. Stage is yours. This is Oliver and his talk about influencer marketing strategy.
Hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. It's just too bad we can't do it in person. I guess the last year makes us all realize how much we miss traveling. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Olivier Bourque. I'm VP of Marketing and Business Development at Crack Revenue, and now in charge of our brand new influencer platform, Fans Revenue. And this is why today we're going to talk about, guess what? Influencers. I often get questions about influencer marketing, especially since I started working on this project, and I have to say most of these questions are very relevant ones. So today, I was trying to find a way to best approach that topic that plenty of people talked about in the past couple of years, and I felt, what can I do a bit differently? So I decided to play some FAQ today with you. I split my presentation in two parts. First one is about what you can see here on screen. Influencer marketing is all about getting access to a fan base, not just an audience. And just that triggers a lot of questions. First one is probably the most obvious one. The question is very simple. The answer is a lot less simple. How can I make sure to pick the right influencer for my brand or for my product? As I said, very simple question. Answer is a bit more complicated. Why is that so? Because too often picking the right influencer is an emotional process, and it shouldn't be. It should be as rational as any other marketing campaign. So the way it works, you get very enthusiastic about one influencer. So you look at the influencer, you look at the audience, you look at the audience you're trying to get in touch with for your product, and you kind of feel that it is the perfect match. But that doesn't work that way. It's not because you have the same potential audience that you're going to be able to sell your product properly. That doesn't mean that the influencer's audience is going to like your product. So how can we manage that and still be successful? Explanation is a bit complicated. Matching audiences doesn't mean that they have the same interests. And on top of that, that doesn't mean that they have the same level of engagement. So let's start with a very obvious example. That's a pretty funny one. So we have this influencer. He is a funny guy. He likes to make jokes. He plays all kind of tricks on screen. And his audience obviously is built on people who like to laugh. They're mostly middle-aged men. So when you have a product like this one to sell, I know that's a pretty funny one. And I said in the first place I needed to go with an obvious example. So let's say you have a product like that to sell to that audience. It seems like a perfect fit. And you're probably right. It's probably working very well. But let's dig a bit deeper and try to figure out why it works or why it would work. First of all, I said it in the first place. We have the same audience in both cases. So it's the first requirement. You want to sell something that's a potential buyer. So we have that in the first place. Then we think of what kind of purchase is that? Is it an instinctive purchase or a rational one? When you look at that product, the answer is very obvious once again, instinctive one. So that works very well with that influencer. Then when you look at the cost of the product, it's probably what, 15, 20, 25 bucks at most. So it's kind of a no-brainer. If you like the product, you like the influencer who's talking about it, it becomes an easy sell. Then we'll look at something else. Is it a one-time purchase or a recurring purchase that we're looking for. In that case, once again, it's a one-time purchase. It's very different than trying to get a commitment from a customer through products or services, such as the Dollar Shaving Club, where you look for long-term engagement. In this case, you're looking for short-term engagement, very low cost, some product that is a perfect match with the audience. And on top of that, that's a product that sells by itself, as you can see. Just the name says it all. So when you have that perfect situation, you can expect a pretty good return on investment. But unfortunately, it's not always the case. What if your product doesn't fall within these very easy to deal with categories? That is when you have to rely on the influencer's ability to deliver a sales pitch. Even though he has a sold audience, that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy sell. And that is the tough part to figure out, how to ensure success. So there are ways to overcome that challenge. First thing you should do is look at other products promoted by this influencer. What kind of product has success? Also check specific views for these posts or videos. Do people make comments on those specific videos or posts? Do they like the fact that the influencer is promoting a product or that specific product? Do they say it's kind of inappropriate to sell a product like that? So these are comments you should be very aware of, and that gives you a good idea if the influencer has been efficient in selling other products. Then you can look if they advertise the same products more than once. All advertisers are the same. They want to make money. They don't want to throw their money through the window. So if it's a good sign, if there's more than one post promoting the same product, that means that the influencer has the ability to deliver a trustable and efficient sales pitch, bringing a good ROI for the advertiser. Next question. How can I make sure that the influencer won't hurt my brand? I hear this one very often as well. Key is to forget the influencer's star status and look specifically at some components. First one being language. Are you comfortable with the way he talks? That's the easy part. You can always look at videos, see the kind of humor he's using, kind of wording he's using, that kind of stuff. So it's easy for you to picture himself talking about your product or your brand. And funny thing is, you pick an influencer because you like the way he is, but at the same time, once you start talking about your product and your brand, quite often advertisers ask for changes, ask them to use a different tone, different wording. So it's like figure out if you're to enter a new relationship with someone. Like, don't expect the other one to change. Pick it as that person is. Same thing with influencers. Don't expect them to change. If you're to deal with them, live with the fact that they're going to be the way they are. Don't try to change them, and you're going to be helping yourself making the right choices. Also, there's the matter of controversy. Is there a potential for it? Once again, it is very easy to take a look at the other posts, the other videos. If you're dealing with an influencer who likes to do pranks, that's a good sign that that might happen again. There might be some unhappy people. Are you comfortable with those kind of situations happening when it's going to be talking about your brand? So that's something you need to be aware of. And the one thing that crosses my mind, even though they do the perfect sales pitch, the delivery is like top-notch. Still, what the influencer is all about could hurt your brand because there is controversy in cases like that. First example that crosses my mind, Tiger Woods. He was delivering perfect sales pitch for the different advertisers that were dealing with this guy. What happened in his private life still influenced the way advertisers look at their partnership. That's why companies such as AT&T, Gillette, Gatorade decided to end their deal with Tiger Woods. Some other decided to keep going with him. In several cases, that was a good choice, but still there was some risk management involved with that. Same thing goes with value. Are you sure that the influencers share the same value that your brand is all about? Take that into consideration while picking an influencer. The last thing you should take a look at are other sponsors dealing with these influencers. For example, CBD. In several states, several countries, that's something that's fully legal. Still, some advertisers wouldn't like to be associated with an influencer that's promoting CBD, even though it's legal, as I said. So take some time to look at what are the other products that he talks about. Even though it was a long time ago, we know that everything that's on the web lasts forever, so make sure you do your homework properly. So take a good look at everything that you can manage. Let's make sure that you check everything that you can. And if an influencer is to hurt your brand, it has to be for something unexpected, not something you should have seen coming. My next question is a very interesting one. Should I work with reviewers rather than influencers? And for each analysis that says that influencers work better, there's one saying that reviewers work better. So let's start with influencers. And there's a lot of things we already talked about. What can you get from influencers? You benefit from an audience that specifically decided to follow this influencer. So you kind of expect that they will trust what he's saying. They will be interested in doing exactly what he's saying. So if he talks about a product or uses a product, you might expect that audience to do just the same. Also, keep in mind that influencers are business people. If they don't help the advertisers make money, they won't be able to monetize their audience in the long term. So basically, they will really work for you. They are like salespeople that you hire to do a different sales pitch to an audience, but they are salespeople that you hire. Also, they do commit themselves to the product. It's their own image that they're playing with. So it makes the audience trust that they really believe in the product. If not, they wouldn't talk about it. And then you have also easy access to their stats, their audience. There are plenty of influencers platforms that do provide you with these informations. So it's easy to see if their trend is good, if they have more viewers, less viewers with each video. So it sounds pretty convincing that dealing with influencers is a sure bet. What about reviewers now? Above all, they appear neutral, which is a good way to gain trust. They go into details also while describing your product, often reviewing not only the product itself, but the whole process, starting with the online purchase, all the way to the live unboxing. So it's great when you want to show your audience how simple it is to deal with your company. Also, their speech is rational, a lot more than emotional. So there's a lot less risk for them to say something that they shouldn't be saying about your product. So it's a very safe approach. Also, one thing that we often forget, but their content is long-lasting and quite often very well supported by an efficient SEO strategy. So you keep having sales in the long term just because the review stays there for a very long time, as opposed to a post that brings sales in the very short term. Review has a long-lasting effect. So interesting thing to take into consideration. Also, people are not distracted by the influencer and can focus on the product. In the first place with influencer, people are interested by the influencer himself, not by the product they're promoting, as opposed to review. When you look for a review, you don't look for the individual, you look for information about the product they're reviewing. So that's a big difference. Still, I got to admit that reviewers sometimes are also real stars. There's a very thin line between the two. Some people could have easily both status. For example, my son is crazy about cars and he follows very enthusiastically reviewers such as Doug DeMuro or GMK001. These guys are stars just as influencers. But most of the time, reviewers have a different status. So what should you pick to promote your product? And the answer is quite simple. Just do both. Why pick one option when there's two very good ones available? And that brings us to the next section of this presentation. So one thing that you have to keep in mind, influencers should be part of your marketing strategy, not be your marketing strategy. And that statement is the answer to many questions I'm being asked as well. So let's start with the first question. Are influencers more efficient in launching a brand rather than promoting a well-established one? In my mind, it's all a matter of risk versus rewards. As we said previously, influencers do have instant credibility and awareness, as well as a sold audience, which is great to bring the spotlight on a new brand. And this is why you want to work with influencers in the first place. But that very same fame that the influencers have might leave the new brand in the shadow. Customers might recall the influencer, but potentially not the new brand. And this is some kind of the risk you need to manage. Also, as mentioned previously, It's also a matter of instinctive purchase versus rational purchase. The more your products require explanation, the more you'll want the customers to focus on your product rather than the person who talks about it. So risks are pretty much the same for a new product and an established one. Now the rewards. That's where there's a big difference. An established brand does not need quickly build credibility and brand awareness. A new brand does. That says it all. Like there's a shortcut that's available for a new brand that people should take. For a well-established brand, there are risks that we talked about that might make it less interesting for them to deal with influencers. There are some edgy cases. For example, you have an old brand, you want to use influencers to give a younger image to your brand, but still, in my mind, the reward is a lot bigger for a new brand that can benefit from that fast lane. And on top of that, there are also ways to reduce the risk I talked about. Keep in mind the purpose of this section of my presentation. Influencers are not the unique touch point with the customers. It should be one of the touch points with the customers. Any media strategy is based on a concept that's been tested and proved time over time over time. Reach and frequency. Reach without frequency is a waste of money, and frequency without reach is hardly profitable or scalable. So success will require multiple customers' touch points. Messaging should also be split based on strengths and potential of each channel. So keep in mind that what influencers can't bring to a new brand, other channels could. So plan all channels at the same time. Do not build your strategy solely on one influencer. Should you use influencers to raise brand awareness or to trigger sales? That's an easy one for once. Obviously, an answer could be, let's do both. I said that already, so I won't do it again. So the first question you have to keep in mind is, are you going to be able to track brand awareness growth through influencers? Not very easy. We try all kinds of things, but to be able to isolate results, to isolate growth, specifically for influencers, it's something that is very challenging. So if you're not able to track properly that growth, how can you make sure it is an investment, not an expense? On the opposite, the reason why you pick an influencer in the first place is because you want to basically influence people. Basically, you want to convince them to buy something. That's what sales is all about. Influencers add the engagement component that other channels can, so use the other channels to raise brand awareness and use influencers to close sales. One last one, fan base overlap. Is it good or bad? And I'm being asked very often, should I avoid influencers having the same audience and everything? So I'm going to try to cover that. So while searching for influencers, especially through dedicated platforms, we often end up with several influencers having pretty much the same audience. So how can we deal with that? All goes back to the reach and frequency concept. And at some point, if you hit the too much exposure level, let me tell you one thing, it doesn't happen very often. Like there are so many people out there, so many platforms, so many channels, it's hard to hit the too much exposure level. But still, there are some cases where it happens. So dealing with influencers with the same audience definitely won't hurt your brand. In fact, it helps bring credibility to your brand, and it fits very well within the multiple customer touchpoint strategy. So to start with, it is a good thing, up until it starts affecting your campaign performance. Because at the end of the day, goal is to make money. So you don't want to spend too much money on influencers if your sales do not grow accordingly. So some strategies are easy to implement in order to make sure that you do not spend too much or the overlap do not become a bad thing for your campaign. So start by spacing posts from influencers with the same audience. That way you're going to be able to track their sales individually, see what kind of impact they have on your overall sales. But then once you have that information and something to benchmark yourself with, then you're able to try something different. Then you ask them to post pretty much at the same time. So you'll see if there's an increase in your sales or a sales reduction. And it might seem strange said like that, but in some cases, especially when you have products that do only need one explanation or one view to be purchased, in cases like that, like if you have too many different influencers talking about the same product, chances are people will have already purchased that product. On the other hand, if some products do need more explanation, a higher frequency, then it might be a very efficient strategy, but you won't know unless you try it. So in conclusion, do not improvise. Planning, measuring, and adjusting is key. Know what the influencers will post. Know when they will post. Make sure you can track results and make adjustments to the flow and the contents. Just keep in mind that you can and even you should optimize influencers' contents and flow just as much as any other type of campaign. So as we often say, influencers marketing, same thing, but different. Thank you very much, everyone.
you.